You're listening to Capital City Sports Talk. I'm Matt Moore,
I'm Tom Benning.
and we have quite the show in store for you this afternoon. We'll be here till 6 o'clock, just like every Tuesday. And you can catch us on SGTV's Capital City Sports Talk every Thursday at 8. Tom, you got anything you want to say to the people
Did you
of
give
Columbia?
our phone number and IM information, things
Maybe
like
I'll
that?
do that, yeah.
I'd appreciate that.
All right, I'll do that. You're listening to WSC FM Columbia 90.5. You can reach us on the phone at 803-576-9872. Phone calls are always appreciated. That's 803-576-WSC. Or you can talk to Tom online, like I'm sure Jake Broom already is doing, at WSC On Air, all one word, on AOL Instant Messenger. So is Jake there, Tom?
Jake is here. He's already given me the updated 2006 Gamecock Challenge standings.
Sweet. Let's start it off with that.
Jake Broom is in first, as usual, at 57-13. He went 9-1 last week. I am now tied with Matt Moore for third place, I guess, or
that's a tie for second.
Yeah, Broom, I don't know what you're doing there. We're both at 53-17. You had the perfect week last week. Congratulations. Riley's a ways back, to say the least. He's at 44-26, as is Van Haren. And the staff of the week is apparently tied with Riley and Van Haren at 44-26, despite a 4-6 week last week.
I had a pretty good week last week, didn't I?
You did.
Yeah.
Except for that Minnesota pick over, or
Are
that
you serious?
North Dakota State pick over
I
Minnesota.
picked North Dakota State to beat a Big Ten team by 1 point, and what happens? They lose by 1 point. You
Matt,
got to give me a little bit of credit on that.
I said this before we came on air. There's only winners and losers, and you're a loser in this case.
Well, Tom, looks like we're tied when it really counts.
I guess so.
So I can live with that.
All right. I guess just want to talk about what's on our mind.
Yeah, sure. What do you got for us?
Well, what's on my mind is this enormous game coming this weekend, the Tennessee game. We'll get a little in-depth breakdown of the matchup later on the show, but all the events surrounding the game are really what's on my mind. We have the blackout. There's game day, and really I think I want to focus on the blackout. And Matt, do you think this is a good idea or a bad idea?
I think it's a good idea. I think really the Carolina fans need something that just kind of rallies them together, and something like a blackout or a whiteout up in Penn State or the solid orange at Clemson. By the way, there was no purple out.
There wasn't even really a solid orange.
Well, it's basically, see, that kind of gets a little screwy when it gets cold, I think, because people start wearing jackets. But the thing about a blackout is everybody's got some black that they can put on.
That's true.
And just like at Penn State, everybody's got a white shirt or something
With
like
the
that.
Clemson purple out, is it true that the administrators at Clemson sent out emails and whatnot to the students saying that their marketing campaign was solid orange? That's why they couldn't do the purple out?
That is, in fact, true. Terry Don Phillips, the athletic director at Clemson, basically made a statement to the students saying that they support solid orange and wouldn't – like, they would be okay with a purple out, but it'd have to be completely student organized. They wouldn't make T-shirts. They wouldn't help pay for T-shirts, anything like that. So, I mean, really, if the students could have got that together, it would have been pretty impressive, especially with the administration not working with them. But it ended up working out all right for the Tigers this weekend.
Well, enough about the purple, the failed purple out, I might say.
Man, you asked.
But with this blackout, already there's a Facebook group, Blackout Against Falls, with 1,500 members in it, and honestly, that's not going to cut it as far. I mean, obviously, there's good people who know about the blackout who aren't in that group, but if the blackout is going to happen, it has to happen with everybody, not just the students. Obviously, all the students, but the old people, the little kids, everybody has to be in the blackout, because I was not here at this university in 2001 when Florida came into town.
Right.
But I remember watching it on television, and it was probably one of the most electric atmospheres I've ever been a part of, even though I wasn't even there. Yeah. It was just ridiculous. I tried to find the clip on YouTube of it, and ESPN, with its copyright infringements, which is garbage, but whatever, took it off of YouTube. But Kirk Herbstreit said it was the loudest stadium he'd ever been in. So if you can just imagine Williams-Brice just pitch black, everybody from the old people, little kids to the students, I mean, that would just be an incredible home field advantage. I think it's a great idea. We're going to run a column in the Gamecock tomorrow, hopefully an editorial. So if you're listening, spread the word. Blackout needs to happen. There is the concern, though, in that Florida game that South Carolina ended up losing 54-17. So do you think there's any kind of jinx or curse with the blackout, or is that just the fact that South Carolina wasn't that good and Florida was just phenomenal that year?
I think it's definitely the latter. Florida, pretty phenomenal. South Carolina, not so great. This year, it's Tennessee. Tennessee's an incredible team, but I think they're very beatable. I think Alabama proved that last week, and we'll touch on that later on. But South Carolina's got a chance basically to, if they win, then they're in good shape. And if they don't, then they're out of the conference race again. But they're in control of their own destiny. So
this is very true.
We'll
and
see what happens.
another thing for the 2001 game is that Spurrier had this comment after the game that he thought he liked the blackout from a Florida perspective because it helped his receivers see the ball. And I've seen people citing that on discussion boards and whatnot for, on Facebook or wherever, that, Spurrier said this, he's not going to support it. Well, if it helped Spurrier's receivers at Florida, why could it not help Sidney Rice, Kenny McKinley, and company?
Yeah, I think
that's just a ludicrous argument.
Lots of people talk about factors that help one team but not another. I don't buy it here. I don't know.
Right.
That doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. If receivers are going to catch the ball or they're not, and I don't think it has a whole lot to do with what the fans are wearing. So
right.
Hopefully our receivers will catch a few more than Tennessee's, but we'll see what happens.
Broom pointed out that Spurrier was being sarcastic when he said that about the blackout, but my point is that people are citing that as an example as why there shouldn't be a blackout. I don't think that's really a fair statement. This is what Broom said also, that it's just been misunderstood. And we have Stephen Fast now in studio. And Stephen, hey, Matt, can you turn Stephen's mic on? Were you here during the 2001 blackout?
No, I didn't go to the game, but I've seen the video, and it's pretty crazy.
What are your thoughts as far as the blackout? Is this something you're really for, or?
I mean, I don't think it matters either way. I support the. There's also a Facebook group that just says be loud, and I mean, I'm sure the blackout would help with that. But I mean, if everybody comes and as loud as they can be, that'd be more help than everybody wearing the same color. And along the lines of what Broom said, I think with the way Spurrier, with the way Spurrier deals with things, that his comment about the receivers seeing the ball well was just probably in response to a dumb question about what he thought about the blackout after his team had just stomped us. So
right. Jake Broom was in the stadium, not as a student, obviously, but he said it was the loudest he's ever seen or heard. Fast, now you've been at practice this week and at the press conference. Has Spurrier said has he made any reference to the blackout or anything like that?
No, he hadn't said anything about a blackout or made a reference to asking people to wear black. I'm sure he doesn't care, and he saw what happened last time. He doesn't think it's that big a deal, but I'm sure it'll bring the fans together to some extent. Other than that, he hadn't said anything about it.
You were here, I guess, 2 years ago when it's kind of confusing when there was an attempted blackout against Georgia. Is that correct?
Right.
And what happened? Why didn't it work out?
Why didn't that happen?
I'm not sure. I mean, we didn't have Facebook back then. That was probably it. To spread the word. I don't know how word got around in 2001, but I guess the effort wasn't there. Of course, we played a lot better against Georgia in that game than we did
against Florida.
Right.
But I don't know. To my knowledge, there hasn't been any official support from the university, which I think if they were handing out, obviously it's going to be cold, but you can put a black T-shirt over any kind of coat or jacket.
Yeah.
So if maybe they somehow got with like Eat More Tees or whatever that T-shirt company is, just get it real cheap. I remember.
If they want to go real cheap, just hand out those black towels, like instead of white towels, just to get some black in the
just
stadium.
Black, period.
There's going to be people wearing black, and especially students who know about the blackout. But for people that don't, just get some black in their hand or something.
Yeah,
exactly.
definitely.
I haven't seen a lot of those promotions this year. Have y'all been in the stands and had that? I'm usually
No, they gave out some posters at the Auburn game,
Chick-fil-A posters.
and those helped keep the rain out for about 2 seconds.
Yeah.
Well, like, I mean, they gave us those cheap white towels against Kentucky that Thursday night game a couple years ago.
Yeah.
Jared Lorenzen came, and I mean that was huge. Everybody just like, you know, if you didn't want to say anything, you just had to stand there and wave your towel around.
Right,
It's better than nothing.
Yeah, or the big cock and fire pull-out things that we got. When did we get those?
Was that the
year?
Florida game?
Yeah, that was Florida game. They had cock and fire and defense on the other side.
Nice.
So I mean, they've been known to give us some stuff before. I've never seen T-shirts, but
Right.
I mean, still very doable. And it's a very winnable game and a must-win, really. If
As far as like a
if
conference
South
division
Carolina,
title or anything
if they're
like that.
worried about that sort of thing, so
I think they could still have a successful season without a
right.
victory here,
Oh,
but-
I agree completely. They'll go to a bowl game, and because all they really have to do is beat Mid Tennessee State. But
Stock
beating
still.
Tennessee is a big deal if there are any thoughts of SEC championship,
All
and
right.
really the same for Tennessee.
This is
So-
very true. We're going to talk some World Series. It's tied 1-1 right now. In Game 1, St. Louis took it to Detroit 7-2. And then the Tigers came back in Game 2 3-1. But the real story coming out of this World Series has to be Kenny Rogers and the mysterious smudge on his hand. Matt, what are your thoughts? I guess if you haven't heard, in the first inning of the Game 2, Tony La Russa noticed a kind of a brownish type smudge on Kenny Rogers' throwing hand. He asked the umpire to check it out, and they had it removed. There was no punishments or anything like that.
Right.
And so the question is, was he scuffing the ball with pine tar or something like that? Kenny Rogers says it was dirt. La Russa says it wasn't. So what are your thoughts, Matt?
No way it's dirt, first off. Like, that's ridiculous.
All right.
You and I were talking about how it was glossy, like in the
And
in the shots of it.
it was freezing.
yeah.
How are
like,
you
where
going
are
to
they
get
gonna
like a
find-
mud type substance when the ground is frozen?
Yeah,
Give me a break.
I don't buy that. I think he's definitely doing something that, for the simple fact that he felt, or they felt the need to wash it off of his hand, just kind of proves to me that it was something that didn't need to be there. And I don't know why it wasn't caught earlier. I don't know why he pitched an entire inning with a smudge on his hand, but it's ridiculous. I can't. I don't know. Cheating in sports is it's a little ridiculous to me, and I don't
But
get it.
they told him to remove it, so they obviously went up and saw it on his hand.
Right.
If it was pine tar, why wouldn't they have thrown him out of the game or suspended him or something like that?
I don't know. I have no idea. I don't know what was going through their minds. Like why Tony La Russa didn't protest the inning. I guess basically he did after the game. He said there's no way it was dirt. I mean, if that's what he's thinking, it seems like the umpires could have made some official decision, but that obviously wasn't made because Kenny Rogers pitched 8 innings, didn't he? 8
Right.
fantastic
And
shutout
even
innings.
after the smudge was gone, he was
Right.
lights out.
Well, that's the point that the Tigers are making, that even though it may have been something, he pitched 1 inning with it. And granted, he went 3 up, 3 down, but he still pitched 7 more innings of shutout baseball. Pretty incredible pitching. So, I don't know.
Well, the interesting thing I thought was that ESPN, I believe, went back and looked at various games, and they found that it was consistently there, that this wasn't just a one-game type deal. And, I mean, it may not have been as large as it was in this one, because I don't know how you couldn't notice that.
really,
I mean,
it was huge.
I mean, it wasn't like a drop or even just like, I mean, that was what, probably, it was bigger than $50, don't you
Yeah,
think?
it was on. I mean, it was covering the base of his thumb, basically. So,
Or wasn't
yeah.
it like the So, I don't know. If they do determine that that he was scuffing the ball, he was using pine tar, what do you think they do? Can they punish him even though it's kind of after the fact?
It seems like they'd have to punish him. I don't think you can punish the Tigers. Like, you can't take the win away from them. You can't. I don't know, but I think that you don't. He's definitely not pitching for the rest of the World Series if that decision is made soon enough.
All right, and kind of with that, if he's scheduled to pitch in Game 6, if it gets there, what effect do you think this will have on his pitching or on the series as a whole?
Kenny Rogers is crazy anyway, so I don't think this little incident's going to affect him very much, especially if it's something that he's been doing all season or his whole career for that matter. For the Tigers' sake, I mean, he's an integral part to that pitching staff, that rotation, which is a very good rotation. And if it goes to Game 6 and he's scheduled to pitch, that could be bad news for the Tigers. But I personally don't even think it's going to go to Game 6. So
where I'm concerned is that reporters are going to keep asking Kenny Rogers about this. And we know how Kenny Rogers deals with reporters.
Do you feel another smashed camera coming on?
I feel more than that, just a general smackdown on somebody, just taking it to him and whooping them. I honestly think that's what's going to happen if, especially if something comes out in Game 6 and he has something, it's just going to be a disaster. But I guess one thing with this is it's kind of brought attention to an otherwise kind of forgotten series. I mean, these are some of the lowest ratings that the World Series has gotten. Do you think this series is good for baseball, and why are the ratings so low? I mean, Detroit and St. Louis certainly has a huge fan base. Right. Detroit's kind of this Cinderella type story. Why are people not caring?
It seems like you would like the Cinderella team against against basically America's team. That's what I kind of think of St. Louis. Like they're the team of baseball, really. Everybody I don't know a whole lot of fans that hate St. Louis.
Unless you're a Cubs fan.
Unless you're a Cubs fan.
But
Cubs fans hate everything.
Yeah,
that's
Cubs
true.
fans don't have a whole lot to like. But I don't know. Seriously, how much of the World Series have you seen?
I really haven't taken in that much, and I guess, I don't know. There's other things to do. It's not.
Yeah.
There's no. I guess you should be excited about the Tigers, being there. But St. Louis, they're one of those teams that are just. It's almost like with the Braves. They had all that success, and then towards the end of their run, it was just kind of like, whatever.
Yeah.
You've been
I
doing
agree.
it, and it's just over and over again. So maybe that's why the Cardinals aren't bringing as much interest to it.
Right.
And there's not really I think when the Yankees are in it, it's not so much that people like the Yankees, it's that they hate them.
Yeah.
They want to see them fail.
Yeah.
So there's not any of that, just boiling hatred going on here.
How much of a bigger series do you think this is if the two best regular season teams in baseball, the Mets and the Yankees, match up in the World Series?
You're seeing ratings at the roof.
Oh, yeah.
There's no question.
Another Subway Series would be pretty incredible for baseball's sake. And they just, I don't know. It didn't happen this year. And I like the Tigers. I like watching them play. I hope that Kenny Rogers doesn't factor into the outcome of the series. But I like watching them pitch, and they're just gritty players as far as hitting goes and good fielders. An all-around good team that came out of nowhere basically this year. So, I don't know. I haven't watched a whole lot of it, but I try to catch a little bit when I can. So, we'll just have to see what happens.
Yeah. Fastener, real quick, what is your opinion on the smudge? What do you think it is?
I'm sure it's pine tar, but like I was just talking to Hilliard about, the suspension is supposed to be 10 games. So if the umpire came over and told him to go wash his hands, that just seems kind of shady. At the same time, you can't blame him for trying to even the odds. Players these days using cow testosterone and
That's true.
whatever they're juicing up with. He's using pine tar. Give him a break. Although he could also be on roids. I'm not saying he is. But the dude has the biggest head I have ever seen.
He does have a large
And he
head.
obviously has the temper, so.
Right. He's got the mood swings. I think it's the pine tar, though.
It could be.
It's getting to him.
That's
Did
tough.
he actually wash it off, or did he lick it off? Did anybody see?
Actually, he went inside the clubhouse and put it under the bill of his hat.
There you go.
So there's
Kenny
that's
Rogers.
my theory.
All right.
He pitched so well when it was off his hand. So, under the bill of his hat.
Yeah, we're going to be right back. You're listening to Capital City Sports Talk with Matt and Tom, and we'll be back to talk Tennessee, South Carolina football.
This is the kind of immaturity and unprofessionalism that was associated with the SGTV years ago. And it's not going to happen again. I will take away keys. Okay, this is not funny.
Hey, Drew.
Why are you smiling? This is not funny. This is a waste of student television fees.
We paid for it.
Out of your own money, you paid for this.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, what about the air?
The air?
Yes, the air that costs money. I was away doing a good TV show, and you guys come in here and f*** up my office. If it's not cleaned up by 8 o'clock in the morning, I'm going to come back and take pictures, and there's going to be hell to pay.
Did you get all that? Every second. Good.
I wasn't mad. Come on, guys. I was pretending to be mad.
See you on VH1, asshole.
Come on, guys. Oh, f*** me.
Next week's Tennessee, and hopefully we can play without these penalties and turnovers. If we can, we got to believe we can hang with them after today.
We're going to change things up a little bit, though, as far as the preview goes. Usually we pit quarterback versus quarterback and running back versus running back.
And wide receiver and so on.
Right. But we're going to change things up a little bit in that Tom is going to play a little devil's advocate. And that's what I guess we're going to call it. We're going to name it the devil's advocate. And Alex is going to be on Carolina's side, of course, sports editor, Daily Gamecock. And Tom is going to be playing the role of Tennessee supporter. So it shouldn't be too tough of a role for Tom to play.
The role.
Right.
Does that mean I got to deal with Hilliard when it comes time for Florida?
No.
Oh, thank God. Thank you. You just saved my day.
It'll be one of us. But the thing is, I will be arbitrating. I will be moving the thing along, and we're going to pit quarterback versus defensive back, things like that.
Well, actually, this is unprecedented.
Uh-oh. Do we have a caller?
We have a caller who wants to talk about Clemson, so we're going to put the USC Tennessee preview on hold for a little bit, and we're going to take a call.
All right, you there with us?
Yeah, I'm here.
Hey, how's it going?
I'm doing pretty good.
All right, what you got for us?
First off, I got to say the show's awesome, and you guys do a good job.
I appreciate it. What's your name?
This is John.
Where are you calling from, John?
I'm in Columbia.
All right.
Basically, I just wanted to throw this out there.
Okay.
That I would have to say that the uniforms Clemson wore this past weekend were the grossest thing I've ever seen in my life.
I agree with you 110%.
John, you're killing me, man. You're killing me. Now, see, I like the purple. I was a fan of the purple.
You know what they look like?
What do they look like?
The purple thing from McDonald's.
That is an excellent point.
Oh, man.
I think, you know what, John, I think the purple maybe in doses would be all right, maybe like purple pants or something like that as more of an accent. But I thought the purple total uniform was just incredibly overwhelming.
Well, see, okay, the thing was, I was in the stadium about an hour before the gates opened, so I was watching them warm up and stuff, and it was weird because they had the orange jerseys on with the purple pants. That's how they started warming up. And I was like, all right, that's cool. They got the purple pants on. But then, I mean, I was down on the hill when they started to come out, and I'm like, whoa, they changed jerseys. They're in straight purple now. And it kind of took a lot of people by surprise. If anything, everybody thought they were going to go straight orange because of how the purple out got shut down and everyone was talking about solid orange and stuff. But I don't know. I really didn't hate the purple jerseys.
I just couldn't handle it. It was horrible.
But
honestly,
you can't say that it didn't work out for them, though.
Well, how about FSU and they're all black?
I actually didn't really like the all black just because it's not one of their colors. You know what I'm saying?
I didn't particularly care for it either.
But, John, honestly, is there any color combination of Clemson's that you would actually enjoy seeing?
Not from Clemson. No, that'd be impossible.
Exactly.
If they just didn't show up to the field, that might work.
Well, we'll see what happens at Thanksgiving.
All right.
You got anything else?
That's about it.
All right.
Just keep up the good work, guys.
All right, I
we
appreciate it.
All right.
Have a good one.
Yeah.
That was John in Columbia talking about Clemson's uniforms, but I don't know. I was a fan of the purple.
We actually, and there is the phone line.
Oops. Okay, we're back.
All right. Apparently that was the executive producer of SGTV, but we appreciate the phone call.
Yeah.
I kind of like the interaction with the with
Adds
everybody.
a little flair to the show.
Definitely, without question. But all right, let's jump into Devil's Advocate.
Okay. Whew. Yes, the long-awaited Devil's Advocate. All right. So we're just going to jump right into it. We're going to start it off with let's go with Savell Newton and the wide receiving core against Tom and Tennessee's defensive backs.
All right, you start off, Alex.
Well, Savell, a lot of people, we've all been saying it a long time that Savell does give us the best chance to win. He has been giving it over the last couple of weeks. The thing I like about Savell is he's not Blake Mitchell. Blake Mitchell had eyes for Sidney Rice and Sidney Rice only. And Savell has done a pretty decent job of spreading the ball out over the last couple of weeks. Kenny caught a touchdown last week. Sidney caught a touchdown. In the Auburn game, Jared Cook had a touchdown. So Savell's been doing a nice job of spreading the ball around, getting it to some different receivers, getting it all out across the field. He does a good job of seeing, Corey Boyd when he's coming out of the backfield. So, the wide receiving core of Carolina with Savell Newton at quarterback against a Tennessee defense that, for all intents and purposes, has looked good at times and shaky at other times. In the beginning of the Georgia game, when they gave up a bunch of points to Georgia, they looked a little shaky at times to some really inexperienced quarterbacks. But then they come back and they steamroll them, by shutting them down. So for half the game they look great. For the other half of the game they look like crap. So it all depends on which one shows up. I know they've lost a couple kids to injuries this year, and some guys have kind of had to step in. We were talking about the kid who had Dickie Johnson, who had the report done on him. It's just a question of what Tennessee defense shows up. But I like Savell Newton. I like the chances that Carolina's receiving core gives them on Saturday's game.
All right, Tom, what's Tennessee going to have to do to stop the pass attack?
Well, the thing about Tennessee's defense this year is that the secondary is their strength. They have a lot of experience. You have Jonathan Hefney with 3 picks, who's actually a South Carolina native. You have Jonathan Wade, 2 picks, Antoine Stewart, 2 picks. Really, I think the question here is how they react against Savell's running attack, or his running abilities. Are they going to put a spy on him with a safety or something like that? And as far as Sidney, they haven't probably really played a receiver who can jump like Sidney can. But I think if they put a safety over the top, they should be relatively successful. What I saw from the Vanderbilt highlights is, and what we've seen a lot, is those little flare screens where they throw it out to the side and just get whatever they can. Sometimes they break it big. Against Florida last year, Sidney took it big. But I don't think that was going to work at all against Tennessee. One thing about Tennessee defense is that they're always blindingly fast. And, Jonathan Wade, he runs track for Tennessee. So I don't think those little flare screens are going to work. I remember last year that the slants were working, but I'm sure John Chavis has figured that out. I really think that the defensive backs, Tennessee, their experience, speed, even with the talent of Sidney and Savell and Kenya, I think they're much better off.
All right, moving right along. We're going to stay on that side of the ball. Alex,
are you going to give a judgment?
Oh, is that how it's going to work?
This is how
do I decide like the winner? Is that
yes.
All right,
you decide who gets the edge.
Okay, based on the arguments, I'm going to say that Tennessee gets the edge in this situation because of what I saw last week in Clemson when Clemson was able to shut down Calvin Johnson completely. Granted, and it was really because they shut down Reggie Ball. And I think Tennessee's got a better defense than Clemson does, and Calvin Johnson is a pretty incredible receiver. Not to take anything away from Sidney by any means, but I think Tennessee has the advantage in that situation. So, now moving right along. We've got Alex, you're going to have to tell us why Carolina's offensive line is going to be all right versus Tennessee.
What, do I need a magic 8-ball here? Just shake and see what answer I get? Yes, no, maybe. Offensive line is improving. for Carolina. I know where Carolina has the potential to reproduce defensive backs every year, Tennessee seems to reproduce defensive linemen every year. One leaves, another one comes in, goes all SEC, and then goes in the first or second round of the draft. So, this year's no different. Their D-line is exceptionally tough, and Carolina's offensive line is exceptionally weak. Spurrier made the comment against Vanderbilt that he was rotating guys in and out, got Jamon Meredith in there, which helped out a lot. I think Savell saw a little bit of pressure against Vanderbilt, but it wasn't as bad as it's been. They're getting better. That's the big thing, though. They are getting better. Webb Brown is back. Some guys have just returned from injuries. And the more experience these guys get, the better they are. Now, against Auburn, which is a really experienced defensive line, they had a pretty successful game. Gave Savell enough chances, enough opportunities to win it. Can they do that same thing in this game against probably an equally as good Tennessee defensive line? If they can, South Carolina's line can hold up decently. If not, Tom, how good is the defensive line for Tennessee, and how much trouble should Carolina's line be in?
Well, you talked about how Tennessee constantly reproduces D linemen. This is actually kind of a down year after Justin Harrell got hurt earlier this season. So there's kind of been a void there, but it's been filled by players like JT Mapu and Matt McLaughlin and other players. Really, when I look at Tennessee's D-line, and I think really this is almost an unfair matchup just because, South Carolina's offensive line really just is too young to, really have that much success. What happened in the Auburn game is that they just, they didn't do any extended drops. It was, 2 seconds maybe and the ball was out. So, against Alabama, I was really impressed by Tennessee's defensive line. They held Ken Darby to virtually nothing. He had no shot at doing anything, really. And they got a lot. I mean, John Parker Wilson was on his back every single play. So they're going to get pressure.
John Parker Wilson's also not a very mobile quarterback by the standards.
He's kind of sneaky quick, actually.
He is, but he's not.
But he's not Savell.
He's not Savell.
Not by any stretch of the imagination. So, Tennessee's D-line, maybe not as good as it has been in the past, but they're still athletes. You have Xavier Mitchell off the edge, who has 3 sacks this year. They're going to make plays. However, Chavis might with Savell drop him more into kind of a zone or something like that. Not on the outside, but as far as what they do, zone blitz or something like that. So I think that this is pretty clearly Tennessee's edge right here.
Right, I'm gonna have to agree with you on that. Just for the lack of inexperience in South Carolina's offensive line, I will give Tennessee the edge. Next up, we got Alex. Tell us about Carolina's running backs, Corey Boyd and company, Mike Davis. What are they going to do against the linebackers of Tennessee?
Well, Corey Boyd has kind of been the Sidney Rice story this year. Sidney started off the year last year a little slow. I mean, in that first game against Central Florida, didn't have very many catches. Noah Whiteside had the first touchdown of the Spurrier era, blah, blah, blah. Corey Boyd has been that story this year, except he's at the running back spot. His return to the lineup has been huge. Back-to-back 100-yard games. He's been real modest about it as of late, but when I talked to him at the beginning of the year, his personal goal, and a lot of players don't talk about their personal goals, but he did. His personal goal was to get 100 yards. That was just what he wanted. He never had a 100-yard rushing game in college, and he wanted to have one. Well, he's got 2 now, and they're in back-to-back games, back-to-back SEC road wins. So I think he wants to come home, and he wants to do a 100-yard rushing game in Columbia. I think that's the last hurdle he's got to overcome, aside from 100 yards in a bowl game or something like that, where the national spotlight is on you. But what better national spotlight than ESPN's Game Day? So I think, Corey Boyd against this linebacking core, if he wants it bad enough, he'll get it. Now, what you also saw last week was they brought Mike Davis in at the end, a fresh set of legs, and it absolutely gave Vanderbilt no chance to win.
Right.
I mean, in the fourth quarter, Mike Davis came in, hadn't run but maybe 3 or 4 plays all game, freshest legs on the team, and just grounded out and did his thing. And Corey had already had his 100 yards. Here comes Mike. I think he ended up with like 50 or 60 yards. So, if that attack, they do that same thing, let Corey carry the load for most of the game, maybe get a couple scores, get his 100 yards, and then put Mike in at the end with his fresh set of legs and just let him go. The Tennessee defense, the linebackers in particular, could be pretty worn down by then. And I think with those two and their power style of running and a little bit of finesse in there, that it could be something that could shut that Tennessee linebacking core down.
All right, well, Tennessee's linebackers, it's kind of strange. Tennessee is simultaneously, like I said, they just absolutely shut down Ken Darby. But then at other times, they've struggled mightily against the run. Air Force, granted that's a little different with the option attack. They just gashed them up and down the field. Florida had some success running the ball. But, there again, it comes down to this is a mixture of experience and youth. They have a ton of tackles. They're a real kind of, lunch pail type group. They're not – I don't know if there's, a great, NFL prospect in this bunch. But, they do just enough to get the job done. Really, I think maybe where, again, like I was saying with the defensive backs, is it's all about containing Savell. So if they're having to, worry about that, I could see maybe where the running game could hurt it. But, as far as the big picture, because that's really what the running game is. It's a part of the big picture of the offense. I don't know. I think Corey Boyd will have some success. I don't know if Mike Davis will, just because, you can roll over, Vanderbilt, but that's Vanderbilt. So that's my piece.
All right, I'm going to say as far as a running game versus Tennessee's defense, it may not be very good, but when it comes down to Corey Boyd running against the linebackers of Tennessee, I think Carolina gets the advantage just because of how Corey Boyd has progressed throughout the season. He's just getting better and better, and he's also a receiving threat. And when you have to match up a linebacker against a running back like Corey Boyd in a receiving position, then the linebackers are going to struggle a little bit. So I'm going to give that advantage to Carolina and the running backs, but as a whole, give the advantage to Tennessee when it comes down to their defense versus Carolina's offense.
You've also got to give, when you talk about the running game, you also got to factor in Savell Newton because he's going to run
Very
out of
true.
the pocket. So, you've got three guys that can potentially be running the ball at any time on the field because we saw Davis and Boyd play at the same time last game. So you could have potentially three running backs on the field.
That's a good point.
All right.
Right. All right, Tom. Tell us, you don't have to say much about Eric Ainge. He didn't have a great week last week, but he's had some pretty incredible games this season, and he's one of the SEC's top passers. So what are they going to have to do? What is he going to have to do with his receivers, Robert Meacham, one of the best in the country, and Jason Swain? What are they going to do against Carolina's defensive secondary?
Well, it's obvious that Eric Ainge has made tremendous strides from last year. But, I think the real difference in Eric Ainge can be seen in maybe one of his statistically, or at least from if you didn't see the game, you're going to look at it, one of his worst plays. We threw an interception in the Alabama game, and the second he threw it, and it was definitely a pick six. Simeon Castile had to just go down the sideline and get it. Eric Ainge sprints as hard as he can to get the angle on him, pushes him out at the 10-yard line. That ends up being a 4-point difference in the game. Last year, Ainge would have either just put down his head in disgust. He would have been looking over his shoulder to see if Rick Clausen was warming up. It's just a totally different attitude. And when you look at his receivers, this may be going out on a limb a little bit, but I'm going to go ahead and say that Tennessee might have the best receiving core in the nation. When you look at Robert Meacham, South Carolina hasn't faced receivers like this. Robert Meacham isn't going to necessarily out-jump you, but he's going to make you miss, and he can blaze. He can run over you. He's one of those guys. He's not Calvin Johnson who trucked C.J. Gaddis. I had to throw that in there, but
throw in Calvin Johnson's stats too. What was his stat line?
That would be 0. Negative 4 rushing. But anyways, Jason Swain, if he's, I guess the concern there is if he's healthy. He had a little bit of a ankle problem against Alabama, but he still went out there. I just think that while Carolina's defensive backs could probably are the strength of their defense, we know they've had trouble. I guess that was more of a specific situation against Kentucky, but I don't know. When you think if you have Fred Bennett against Robert Meacham, you have Captain Munnerlyn against Jason Swain, you got Carlos against Brett Smith. I don't know. I just think Tennessee has a pretty large advantage right there.
Here's the thing about the Carolina secondary. If there's one thing that we've learned after last week, if you throw it, they will intercept it. And I think that's become the official motto of the secondary. Fred Bennett and Chris Hampton had some early season success with some picks. Stoney Woodson had one against Kentucky. And then Carlos and Captain have one last week. So, pretty much everybody that's taken their snap this year in the secondary has gotten their hands on a ball and has corralled it. And I think that's big. I think that, a lot of teams – back in the old days when Coach Simpson was here, 6 interceptions, and then everybody else maybe had 1 or 2. So to have guys that everybody's got a pretty much an even number of picks and everybody's got a lot of success, knocking passes down and stuff, I think that bodes well for the Carolina defense. Now, they have not faced a quarterback like Eric Ainge. Brandon Cox has had an exceptionally slow year. DJ Shockley's not at Georgia, and the 3 quarterbacks that they do have, and I think only 2 of them played against us.
Right.
They're not all SEC
Not
world
very
beaters.
good.
But by that same token, if we're going to test the Carolina secondary and see how good they actually are with Florida, Clemson, and Arkansas coming up, this is the game that will set the standard. I think Eric Ainge has come a long way. I think he's going to be the SEC's comeback player of the year, just because of the stuff that he's overcome, mentally, emotionally, whatever, after starting off with such a bang. But I think the Carolina secondary, it's not going to be like last year. There's not going to be by picking off the first pass, to set up a Carolina score. It's not going to be anything like that. But I think Carolina's secondary has the potential to do some stuff like they did last year, like with Tennessee's throwing screen passes and Jonathan Joseph just wailing on them before they can even take a step. I think Fred Bennett's got that kind of potential. I think the safeties have that kind of potential. Whether or not they do it is a totally different story. They gave up 4 completions to Vanderbilt's quarterback last week, their starting quarterback, Chris Mixon,
Right.
which I thought was huge because
Right.
I really think he's one of the up-and-coming quarterbacks in the league. A lot of people said he's a lot farther along than Jay Cutler was at that point in his career. So I think the Tennessee quarterbacking situation is a little better than Carolina's secondary, but this is going to be the coming-out party for one of the two, and I think it's got the potential to be the coming-out party for the secondary for Carolina.
I agree with you. I think that the secondary is definitely getting a lot better, but I think as far as progression, Tennessee's passing attack is ahead of Carolina's pass stopping. So for that reason, I'll give the advantage to Tennessee and Eric Ainge, but that's a lot closer matchup than they of course have had their holes. Carolina has, and really Tennessee's had their trouble. I mean, Ainge threw 3 interceptions in last week's first half, but still the Vols are incredible on offense and defense, and I'm gonna have to give that advantage to Ainge and the wide receivers. All right, fellas, we're gonna speed up a little bit just for time constraint. Tom, Tennessee's offensive line versus Carolina's defensive line.
I mean, they have experience. It was kind of a question mark coming into the season, but really, Ainge hasn't hardly been touched at all. Against Georgia, against, Charles Johnson and the name's slipping my mind right now. But Quentin Moses, there you go. They didn't have it. The only sack in that game was on a safety blitz. So they may struggle a little bit on as far as getting a push on the runs, but pass defense, they're just rock solid.
Tennessee's is a little more strength than speed, and Carolina's got a lot more speed than strength on the defensive line. If they can get around the ends, it'll be interesting, but I think Tennessee's line has the potential to block these guys out pretty well. And if anybody gets a hit, it's going to be somebody like Jasper Brinkley or a safety coming on a safety blitz, which we haven't seen a lot of. But I'd have to give Tennessee the edge in this one. I hate to say it, but I'd have to give it to them. But Carolina's D-line is also improving. So
yeah, in this situation, I think it's going to be the linebackers who are going to play a little more pivotal role in getting into the backfield than the defensive line. But a lot of that has to do with how well the defensive line opens up holes for their linebackers. But like Alex said, I'm going to give that edge to Tennessee based on experience. So, Tom, running backs. Tennessee's kind of had a few guys in the backfield this season. But, they're all pretty good. So.
Yeah, when healthy, Tennessee's running game, I think it could be unstoppable. But that healthy part has been kind of hard to come by. Against Florida, they had negative 11 yards rushing, but Lamarcus Coker wasn't there. Arian Foster was hurt, so. Normally there would be 3 backs. You got Coker, Foster, and Montario Hardesty, but Coker's out for 3 weeks, so he won't be there. So really it's Foster and Hardesty in relief. Now, Foster hasn't had the stats this year, but it was around this time last year that he began his string of Tennessee was awful last year, but Arian Foster was a man amongst boys.
Very true.
I mean, he ended the season on with 5 straight 100-yard rushing games. He had a 200-yard
run that he had against LSU, that touchdown.
Right. So
made people look stupid.
But they're not healthy, so I don't know. Alex.
Yeah, all I can remember from Tennessee's Arian Foster is the fumble into the end zone last year in
That's true.
Knoxville. And if he's
Wait,
got the potential,
Was that Corey Anderson?
I thought it was Foster.
don't know.
What's Foster's number?
27.
It was 27.
Okay.
Um,
Corey Anderson fumbled in the end zone against Alabama.
Against Alabama, yeah. But I think Carolina's linebacking core is. You talk about Tennessee's receivers maybe being the best in the SEC. I think Carolina's linebackers might be some of the best in the SEC. I think Jasper Brinkley, before it's all said and done, is going to be on a Butkus watch list and will probably win it if he keeps this pace up. Not this year, obviously, but this is Carolina's strong point on the defense, and I think if there's one thing they match up with, it's the Tennessee running backs very well. I think they did a good job of shutting down an all-SEC guy like Kenny Irons. Tennessee doesn't have an all-SEC guy. Realistically, they don't have an all-SEC guy.
Right.
So put them up against the Carolina linebackers, and I think they're going to dominate this particular part of the game.
Yeah, I agree with Alex on this one. I think I think the strong point in Carolina's defense is the linebacking core, and like Tom said, the health is going to be a concern for the Vols. So
Broom said he's psyched that Jasper Brinkley is going to win the butt kiss.
So I'm going to give that edge to Carolina, and we're not going to worry about special teams because
Ryan Succop's God.
Yeah.
Dude, Tennessee's probably, I think they're better.
55-yard field
Colquitt's
goal.
pretty good.
No, Colquitt would lead the nation in punting, and Will Hoyt's 10 and 12 on field goals this year.
Colquitt just won't leave. That's a problem.
No, it's the new Colquitt.
I don't care. They just need to leave.
There's like 6
I
of
know.
them in
there's
Tennessee.
I know. They're like Mormon kids. There's 20.
All right, fellas. So here's basically what it comes down to. We got to pick scores. Tom, are you prepared to do that?
Sure.
All right.
Well, I guess I'm also going to briefly touch on, probably the biggest matchup here is just the coaching matchup, at least the most publicized. And really, I don't think it's necessarily fair to compare them one-on-one because they're just completely different coaches. Fulmer is the executive type coach who more, doles out responsibility to his assistants and, more kind of, I think of him as a recruiter and things like that, where Spurrier's in there with your X's and O's. And as much as people want to say that last year, Fulmer was just, shaking in his pants when Spurrier walked in the stadium, I don't think that had anything to do with Tennessee losing that game, honestly. Tennessee was just horrible last year. It didn't have, it would have been a completely different story if they went in there, with one loss or they're undefeated and the same thing happened. Then I think you could make a legitimate claim that Spurrier was in his head or whatnot. But really, there's bigger issues than Steve Spurrier last year. So anyways, I think that this will kind of be a statement game for Tennessee. I think it'll be close because I think it's going to be more like Lou Holtz type South Carolina against Tennessee as far as just be a slugfest. So I'm going to go ahead and pick 17-10. Low scoring. I don't know why, but I'm going with it.
All right. Yeah, it's kind of like last year was a very low scoring
17-10
game.
Tennessee. In
Right.
case I didn't clarify.
Right. I'm gonna say that it's very obvious. Just look at the rankings. Tennessee's a top 10 team. South Carolina's getting votes. They're like at 28 now. It's very obvious that Tennessee is the better football team. But you've got a blackout. You've got game day in Columbia. And you've got, crazy fans. You've got a chance to beat Tennessee twice in a row. That is going to make it a close game. But I think Tennessee ends up winning this one 28-24.
Okay.
All I'm going to say on the whole coaching matchup is sit, boo-boo, sit. I'm taking Carolina in this one 24-21.
All right.
All right, well, there you have it. The stage is set for this Saturday. Kickoff's at 7:45. Is that
7:45.
the ESPN
Next
game?
week's game's also at 7:45.
Yes,
Back-to-back
it is.
weeks with ESPN, so get excited, folks.
So I hope everybody's ready for a blackout. We're going to take a quick break here on Capital City Sports Talk.
Hi everybody, I'm Drew Zalitas, and are you sick of all these dull, rusty knives?
Yeah!
And are you sick of these crazy kitchen utensils no one can figure out how to use?
Yeah!
And are you sick of the muck and the grime sticking all over your cookie sheets?
Yeah!
Well then, do I have a product for you. It's the all-new Your Show on SGTV. Every Tuesday at 8:30, we put brand new films made by students right here on USC onto TV for all of you to watch. Now, is that going to knock the crap out or what? Yeah! All New Your Show every Tuesday at 8:30.
Yeah!
He's doing it against a really good rush defense.
Fellas, let's talk some more college football.
Alrighty.
Do you want to do some headlines first, or you want to pick some games?
Let's do some headlines.
All right, first headline I got is the Ohio State-Michigan game countdown has begun. I know they were doing it on game day. They were saying like 676 hours or something stupid like that. But that's a game that everyone is looking forward to, and it's going to be 1 versus 2. I don't see either of those teams really losing a game. It's going to be an incredible football game. Tom, if Michigan loses that game,
Well, all right. This was generated by one of our listeners.
right? Yeah.
Going in stall as his screen name, I guess. Posed this question, and he was wondering: suppose that Michigan does lose to Ohio State, why wouldn't Michigan play Ohio State in Glendale for the national championship game, considering their only loss would be against the #1 team in the nation?
Well, I think the first argument that needs to be made is Texas is going to be able to say the same thing, right?
Okay.
And the second is going to be what about the one-loss teams that didn't get a chance to play Ohio State? Those would be my 2 major arguments. You're going to have teams. You're going to definitely have a team out of the SEC, I think, that's going to have 1 loss, whether it's Florida, Tennessee,
Maybe.
Auburn.
I don't know.
I mean, maybe. I personally think there's going to be. I actually think it's going to be Tennessee, but if you have one of those teams, Florida, Auburn, Tennessee at 1 loss, you might have a team like Clemson at 1 loss. You're gonna have Texas at 1 loss maybe. You're gonna have an undefeated USC, possibly 1 loss. I think there's gonna be. I mean, that's a great case for Michigan. But the problem with college football is the later you lose, the bigger impact it has.
Right.
So
here's the big thing about the BCS. In one word, it's screwy, and I mean that's putting it politely. It's a system that it can either make you a superhero or it can destroy your season, and it's done so for a lot of different teams. It's done so for Southern Cal. It's done so for sending Nebraska to a game against Miami that was a debacle. They probably shouldn't have even been there.
Right.
But the problem is, and the one thing that everybody's overlooking is there's probably going to be an undefeated team from the Big East.
It's all moot. Big East,
I
maybe.
forgot about the Big East.
West Virginia, in my assumption, is going to come out of the Big East undefeated. And if there's one thing I'd like to see, it's Steve Slayton match up against a Big Ten defense where the linebackers are always the product of the conference.
This was actually my next headline was the Big East. West Virginia and Louisville both have a week off before they play each other.
Right.
But what if, this is something I've asked Tom, what if
Rutgers runs the table?
I just want to comment Ohio State, Michigan.
Yeah, well, the reason why that's not going to happen is, like you said, the later you lose in the season, the worse off it is for you. And the other thing that, you made your 2 points. The third point is there's going to be another undefeated team most likely. So you can't punish another team for not losing a game by saying that, Michigan lost to the #1 team nation, even if it was by, a field goal as time expired for a 1-point win, whatever. You still can't punish another team for winning all its games.
I think you can punish them for having not as great a schedule.
Right.
Who's Michigan played? Notre Dame. And
the Big Ten is better than the Big East, period.
The Big Ten is better than the Big East. I'll give you that.
But the Big Ten isn't as
But
good
the Big
as a
East
lot of
also has
people.
3 undefeateds at this point in the season.
That's
the Big
true.
Ten's only got 2. And they have to play each other, so one of them is going to eliminate the other one.
Right.
All right. My point is that there is actually kind of a precedence for this, in that, granted, it was before the BCS, but when Florida and Florida State played each other as 1-2, and they came back and essentially played for the national championship. So I don't know like you said, it does hurt more if you lose later in the season, but you got to consider that the computers are loving Ohio State and Michigan.
Oh, yeah.
They're not going to stop loving them even if Michigan loses. So I think that there is the potential. I personally would be livid about it probably. I mean, like we said, it's moot. It's definitely moot if Southern Cal's undefeated.
Right.
I think that if it came down to it, and let's say the SEC they only have 2 lost representatives. If it came down to a 1-loss Michigan and an undefeated Big East team, I don't think in my mind, there's no question that Michigan goes.
What'd you got, Alex?
You want to settle all this?
All right.
The Big Ten, add a 12th team, change your name, and have a conference championship game.
That's true.
Put Michigan and Ohio State in opposite sides, and let them go.
Alex, then you couldn't have that cool negative space 11 in the Big Ten logo.
Please, that's the worst thing in all college football.
One more thing I was gonna say was that don't discount Michigan. We keep saying
that's true.
When Michigan loses, are they gonna be done? I'm gonna go ahead and say that I think Michigan's gonna beat Ohio State, and that brings up a whole different point. Do you punish the team that's been number 1 for over half the season for losing to the number 2 team?
Well, then the number 1 team.
Right, the best team in the country. So I'm not discounting Michigan yet, and I don't know.
It's all about who's undefeated at the end of the season, who's undefeated after the Ohio State-Michigan game. Because whoever's undefeated deserves to be 1 and 2, in my opinion. Doesn't matter what conference you come from.
See, I disagree.
Yeah, you can't tell me that a 1-loss team from the SEC is worse than an undefeated West
I didn't say they
Virginia.
were worse. I said they were undefeated.
But that's what the rankings should reflect. The rankings should reflect
the BCS.
best
The
team to
BCS
the
will
worst
reflect
team.
that. Now, don't get me wrong. The BCS is going to reflect that. The problem is, if Southern Cal comes out and they go undefeated, the BCS always has a thing for Southern Cal.
It's true. They're
gonna bump
right
them
now.
up to number 2. Whatever happens in the Michigan-Ohio State
I blame
game.
the Harris poll.
Well, you can blame the Harris poll all you want.
I don't know. I think that, like Matt was saying, that the rankings and the national, ideally that the BCS should work out to reflect the 2 best teams in college football playing in the national championship game. Not necessarily the 2 best teams with the best records. And I think we've kind of seen that in the past and a lot of controversy about it. But, I mean, that's the fact of the system right now. I mean, we could get into a whole another show talking about a playoff and all that stuff.
Right.
But I don't know. I just see that, definitely a 1-loss SEC team, maybe a 1-loss Michigan team, maybe a 1-loss Texas team. They could get in over an undefeated Big East team, be it, and like you were saying, posing that question with, for instance, Rutgers, they're going to have wins over 2, maybe top 10, top 15.
Right. Don't get me wrong. Michigan runs the table, up until the Ohio State game, and then falters. They're going to be in the BCS.
Right.
They'll get an at-large bid. As long as they win,
both of those teams.
Right. They're going to get an at-large bid. Don't get me wrong. There's going to be some teams. Let's go ahead and say it. South Carolina runs the table. No. South Carolina runs the table. Whoever they might happen to lose or win against in the SEC championship game, that team's going to be in my opinion. If it's Auburn, especially. South Carolina beats Auburn in the SEC championship game, Auburn probably deserves to go ahead and go into a BCS spot. Maybe Florida deserves to go into a BCS spot, depending on the scores of those games. Who knows? We can't determine that right now. There's still too much football in
a lot of time. Yeah. You've been listening to Capital City Sports Talk with Matt Moore and Tom Benning. We'll be back next Tuesday from 4 to 6, where you can watch us on TV at 8 o'clock on Thursday, or thedailygamecock.com, where we'll have a streaming video of the show later on in the week. For Tom, I'm Matt. We'll be back next week.